Yo, what's good? My name's Kang, and today we're going to be talking about my salary progression from $11 an hour to $80 an hour. For new viewers, I'll give you a quick one-on-one about me. Hi, my name's Kang, like Kangaroo. I'm 24 years old. I studied computer engineering at McMaster University, which is a university in Canada. And now I live and work in Seattle. All right, with all that out of the way, now we can start with my first job, which is working at the front desk of a hotel for around $11 an hour. So I worked at this job for 3 months over my summer of my first year of university. And my friend's dad actually hooked me up with this job, so I was pretty lucky in that sense. Working at the front desk, my day-to-day was like basically checking people in and helping with the day-to-day operations of the hotel. And this job was really fun. I enjoyed working with people and talking to people from all across the globe, but working on my feet all day and talking to angry customers just kind of sucked. Job number 2 was an internship working at the Clorox factory over my second year of summer. There, I basically worked as a process engineer or a mechanical engineer, and I was getting paid roughly $15 an hour. My uncle actually referred me to this position, which I got pretty lucky with there, which is going to be a pretty reoccurring theme in this video. This job was a lot of AutoCAD, where I'd basically go look for broken parts inside the factory, take them back to my desk, measure them, design them up in AutoCAD, and then send them out to get replacements milled. I liked this job because it was my first introduction into like an engineering role, because before I'd worked at the hotel, right? But on the other hand, I studied computer engineering, and this is pretty far from what I consider computer engineering, but as a second year, you have to kind of take what you can get. Okay, before we continue on to my next 3 jobs, I have to kind of explain how internships worked at my university. Basically, we had a program at my school where you could take off a year between your 3rd year and your 4th year in order to do what was called like co-ops, which is basically just internships. And if you took advantage of this, that means you get a full 16 months of internships back to back. And if you can do something like this where you take off a year to do internships, I highly recommend it, but I'll get a little bit more into that later. Okay, so job number 3 was an internship at AMD, and I was getting paid around $21 an hour. I was working on digital rights management for APUs. And you probably have no idea what that means, but basically, you know when you watch Netflix and you try to screenshot like that funny thing in The Office, but when you send it to your friend it's just black? Yeah, that's DRMs, or digital rights management. And if you didn't know, APUs are basically a combination of CPUs and GPUs together, and they're most commonly used on laptops. I worked on a security component within the APU to make sure that this DRM was working properly. My day-to-day while I was working here was doing a lot of manual testing. The way that it worked is we would have like these nightly builds that would build obviously every night, and it would take in everyone's code change and then spit out a brand new build. And what I would do is I would take that build, load it up onto an APU, and do a lot of manual testing just to make sure there's no regressions between like build on Friday versus build on Monday. So when I joined AMD, I had actually signed an offer to stay there for my full 16 months worth of my internships. And I really enjoyed working there. I had a ton of friends. I was getting pretty good at this manual testing thing, and the pay was really good considering I was only like 20 at the time. But after working there for 8 months, I realized I wasn't learning the things that were going to help me on later on in my career. And one day I just woke up, decided to become League Code Weapon and break into big tech. So I uninstalled League, blocked all the haters, and went into Naruto Sage mode and basically studied all day, all night, and applied to every single job that I saw. And after all that hard work, I eventually got 2 back-to-back internships in big tech. And I would think working at AMD, and specifically working in that role in particular, has taught me my most important lesson I've learned in my career so far. You own your career. It's a two-way street. In the same way that your employer could lay you off at any time, you also have the agency to make the decision and leave if you're not learning or earning what you want from this company. So after 8 months of working at AMD, I handed in my resignation letter, I cut off ties with my school's co-op program, and I started job number 4. And just to be clear, I did not get a return offer from AMD because I left 8 months early, which kind of makes sense. Job number 4 was at Microsoft in Vancouver as a software engineering intern. Part of their offer is they also included a relocation or a stipend package. And if you spread that over the 4 months that I was working there, my pay was around $23 an hour. While I was at Microsoft, I was part of their garage program, which basically pairs you up with another group of interns to create a project from scratch. So you can kind of think about it as a hackathon, but like for 4 months. While we were working there, we partnered with a Microsoft team that owns a UI framework. With them, we worked on a collaboration tool that allowed people to share these UI framework templates between each other. The tech stack was TypeScript, and I mostly worked on the front end. But then COVID hit and I had to move back to Mississauga and continue my internship remotely. Aside from that, I enjoyed everything else about the internship. Not gonna lie, this is when the money started to go crazy in the Canadian dollar sense. This internship allowed me to pay for the rest of the school by myself and also start to invest aggressively. At the end of the internship, I got a return offer to Microsoft Seattle, which I ended up accepting. Alright, so now we're on job number 5, which is month 12 to month 16 of my 16-month internships. Job 5, I was working as a software engineering intern at Amazon in Toronto. If you include my housing stipend, my pay was around $30 an hour. While I was there, I was working in Amazon Fulfillment Technologies, specifically in their warehouse and in the area of tracking metrics. The tech stack was Java and Angular, and at the time I really hated working in Java, but looking back, it was actually a really great programming language to work with. And this internship was a really big contrast to what I literally did right before at Microsoft. My previous internship with Microsoft was with a bunch of interns and was working on this greenfield type project. At Amazon, I'm placed on a team with an actual product, and I'm giving a project that will eventually sometime hopefully roll into the product itself. This was probably my most difficult internship, mostly because it was completely online and I was used to meeting with people and learning with people in person. Now I actually prefer working from home, but back then it was hard for me to adjust into that working from home kind of lifestyle. Here is where I learned that one of the hardest parts of programming is understanding the current code base that you're working in and integrating your code into that system or into that code base with the limitations that are placed on that system, if that makes sense. At the end of the internship, I did get a return offer back to Amazon Canada, which had a total compensation of around $140,000. But I ended up turning it down for my current job at Microsoft, which brings me to my sixth and my current job, which is a software engineer at Microsoft. At this point, I've been working at Microsoft for about a year and a half, and if you count my stock package and all my bonuses and stuff like that, my hourly pay ends up being around $80 an hour. When I got my offer, my total compensation package went something like this: $110K in salary, around $30,000 in stock, $10,000 in target bonus, and around $40,000 worth of relocation and signing bonuses in the first year. Since then, my salary has gone up to around $130,000 through a promotion and a raise. When I started working at Microsoft, I got placed on a low-level security team. The whole entire code base was written in C, the files are 20,000 lines long, and it was all written before I was born. Since then, I've transitioned to still working on security components, but now I work on Rust and it's open source. And so far, I'm really happy with my job. In the beginning, I had my reservations about it, and I was worried that what I was working on really wasn't what I wanted to be working on. But after a while, it started to grow on me, and I'm actually really liking the projects that I'm working on and the problems that I have to solve. And I've learned so much at this job already, and to be honest, it could be its own video. But the most important thing I've learned so far is actually not something technical. It's something that's kind of in like the office politics space, and is that your manager matters a lot in terms of what projects you get put on, what raises you get, and your career growth, which is great because the manager I currently have is awesome, and I'm really thankful for that. So that's my career progression so far. And after all of that, there's some things that I want to say. First off, I want to address all the advantages that I had because I think it's important to note that. For starters, my first job was basically just given to me. I didn't have to interview or anything like that. And at the time, the pay was higher than what the minimum wage was in Canada. My mom also paid for my first 2 years of university so that I didn't have to work and could focus on my studies and not failing out. My second job, my uncle referred me, and I only had one other person that I had to interview against. Or when I was working at Microsoft, half of the interns initially didn't get return offers because of COVID, but I did. My Amazon internship didn't get canceled, even though at the time a bunch of internships were getting canceled because of COVID. And I'm not saying this to brag and say that I'm a lucky guy, that I didn't work hard, but to make the point that the job market and life in general is not fair. There's a lot of luck involved in this whole entire industry, down to what LeetCode question you get or what your interviewer had for lunch. And with that in mind, I want to start with my first piece of advice for people who are still in school. Sometimes you have to make your own luck, even if that means reaching out to your strange cousin's dog's friend who might be able to give you an interview. Especially when you're first starting out, throw that pride out the door and don't leave a single stone unturned. Next, applying to jobs as a student is largely a numbers game, and don't get disappointed with the amount of rejections that you're going to get. I also think that you should try to get as much experience as you can. For me, I did a total of 16 months worth of internships, and I guess if you count the Clorox thing, I did a total of 20 months worth of internships. Even with that amount, I didn't think it was enough, and I wish I was somehow able to do more. Another note on internships is I would focus on the experience that you want to get, rather than the pay or the perks that you would get. Personally, I would try to target different size companies. The difference in dynamic between Microsoft and Google is not going to be that big, but if you compare Microsoft or Google to a startup with like 30 people, the difference is going to be crazy. I'd also try to find a strong support system in school. It's no joke that between LeetCode, exams, interviewing, school, all these things together can be really stressful. The only reason I think that I was able to make it out is that I had such a strong friend group that would constantly support each other. Whether that meant studying together or doing mock interviews, I really think you need that core group of friends that are going to help you get through university. And this kind of ties in with my last piece of advice to students, is that comparison is the thief of joy. In the beginning, I compared myself a lot to my friends, but in reality, we're all on our own paths and we all have our own advantages and disadvantages. And trying to compare yourself against someone else, past understanding your market value, is not going to do you any good. And you may be wondering, what gives me credibility to give advice like this? And to be honest, nothing. I'm just a junior engineer, I'm not a rock star, and I'm just a regular guy sharing advice on what he's learned so far. And I would really appreciate it if you had advice to leave it down in the comments so we can all learn from each other. With that being said, we're approaching the end of the video, and I know this was a long one, so thank you so much if you watched this far. If you liked it, please consider liking and subscribing to join the mob. I'm going to try to get to 1K subs this year, so I'd really appreciate your help in doing that. And if you still somehow want to see more of me after this video, you can watch this video right here where the algorithm handpicked a video by me for you.